Do you think that social media has increased this number of suicide?
There's actual stats that show that since the invention of Instagram, the suicide rates have absolutely soared, and especially in young girls. It increased by 50% after COVID.
How do we talk to our girls? What do we say to them? Someone that's listening that has a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old girl.
Gently, and by walking the path together. We have to do this right now. Warning sign or no warning sign. It's prevention rather than cure. And it's like, how can we live more hope-filled, joy-filled lives where we're experiencing the richness? Just because you think that you're the only one who's suffering, remember that that's not the case. For every negative thing that happens, you remember it more easily. It feels harder in your body, and you need 3 to 5 or even 11 positives to tip that balance. I want it to be like the equivalent of smoking on planes, a world where suicide no longer exists.
Welcome to the Jen Gottlieb Show.
Nick, I'm already emotional and we haven't started. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. All right, this is a real moment because the audience doesn't know, but y'all, I'm going to let you in on something. One of the very first real talks I ever did to entrepreneurs was at Nick's retreat. You took a chance on me. We didn't know each other that well. And you called me up and you invited me to come to a retreat you were doing with many women in a home. It was beautiful. And you're like, just talk for like an hour. And I did. And that was one of the first times that I ever really dove into like my story in front of a group of female entrepreneurs. And after that, my whole life was changed. So I need to thank you for that opportunity because it really was the kickstart of everything that I'm doing. And also to be sitting here with you today to talk about this monumental piece of work, which is this book, is a beautiful full circle because I feel like this is the kickstart of something massive for you and the world as well. Most importantly, everyone that's going to get this book, but you birthed it into the world. So I want to congratulate you. I want to welcome you. And I want to make sure everybody knows that Nick is a really important person to me.
Thank you so much. And it's so crazy because I just saw on Instagram a clip of that actual day yesterday. So to be here and for me to have flown across the country when you'd done that all those years ago, and just knowing how much of a example you are of hopefulness and how you've really made it happen. I remember that you said, Nick, I'm going to be the best female speaker in the world.
I said that then?
Yes. Yeah. And I literally watched you day after day show up. And I'm like, you know what? I think she's actually going to do this.
I don't remember even thinking that then, but that's crazy that I guess I did say that. Well, you set the stage for me. And I read this. So I got this full disclosure. The book arrived like last night. So I got to start to dig in last night. I didn't know that you were even writing a book about this topic. I didn't know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because this has been on my mind a lot. I have a lot of friends, family members, people in my life that suffer from mental illness. And this is such a topic that needs to be discussed. And I've been waiting for a book or a piece of media or something to come out that talks about it in a way that feels like the only way that I can describe this after reading some of this book last night and this morning is like a safe space or a big hug. And here you are creating it. So those of you that are listening right now, the book that Nick wrote, One More Day, which is going to be coming out, I think a week after you're hearing this episode, so you can pre-order it now. It's about suicide. So if this is a topic that triggers you, I just want to let you know, like this is what this conversation is going to be about. But the way that Nick talks about it really is so safe and loving and hopeful. And so I'd love to just start off by asking you, why did you decide to write this book?
I mean, I never thought that I would be a positive psychologist that is so passionate about suicide prevention. I just did not see that in my future. But I had 3 of my close friends back in Newcastle in the UK who took their own lives. And it was almost like I was getting this call and it was presenting itself to me again and again and again. I had a lot of confusion originally because I felt frustrated and I felt upset and I honestly felt like a failure, because I felt like a failure as a positive psychologist because my friends loved my work. And my friend Sophie, she came to the book launch for Now Is Your Chance, and then she died by suicide. So I thought, why can't I save my best friends, and do these tools even work? But it was actually in that inquiry and in that questioning that it took me deeper, and it took me into the research and into stuff that's buried. Because positive psychology, when it was invented in the year 2000, it's the science of happiness and it's how we can flourish and thrive. It wasn't originally designed or tested for clinical populations or people that were struggling and suffering. So it's honestly been the most joy-filled, hope-filled thing that I have ever worked on, which sounds really bizarre because of the topic, but actually the context and what's possible for us, there's stuff that we can do. And we can actually stop this.
I read in your book, 700,000 people commit suicide every year. That's what the number is up to?
Yeah.
Does that increase? Has that been increasing over time?
It increased by 50% after COVID, which is just, it's terrifying. And I actually think that COVID was such a blessing in so many ways because it helped people open up and feel comfortable talking about mental health. When I started in positive psychology, almost 20 years ago now, I was weird. Nobody wanted to talk about positive psychology or happiness. It wasn't a thing that would get put in the media. And now, after COVID, people are talking about mental health journeys and they're talking about self-love and self-healing. So I'm just like, this is the time. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a time for psychology. It's a time for us to look after ourselves and really be a stand for ourselves.
In the book, you talk about tiny tools. And I want to jump right into this because I could ask you, why do you think people are dying by suicide at a higher rate than ever before? And we can talk about that. But your book is very actionable. And I know that it was intended to be that. Like, someone that is struggling can open that book. And on every single page, you also have a survivor story. I love that. An anonymous person telling what helped them get through one more day. And I'd love for you to dive right into some of your tiny tools that somebody that's suffering can immediately incorporate into their life, and why you made that like a gigantic section of the book.
Yeah, I think it's something that, I mean, it could be interpreted the wrong way. It could be, look, someone could read that and say, well, why does she think that you can just do these really simple things and that's going to save a life? But actually what we see is that it's the compounding effect of small positive daily decisions that add up over time to build stronger senses of self. So the tiny tools list, like, I'm very basic, Jen. I have it in my notes section on my phone, and I just look at it every single day. And a lot of this is born from me having my own struggles as well. So it's not from this place of, oh, I'm just this positive psychologist and I'm doing the research and it's all theory. Like, I have literally been laying on the floor and I've had to get this list out and I've had to say, like, what do I feel capable of doing right now? And I think when you're struggling, it's very hard to do a complex psychology intervention or go to see a therapist. That just sometimes feels like it's a mountain to climb. So a tiny tool might be as simple as putting on your favorite song and allowing that to create a micro shift within you. It might be going out for a walk for 10 minutes or getting someone else that you love to go out for a walk for 10 minutes. And just knowing that by taking that first step, you can start to feel better because of that.
Okay. I love having those in your back pocket, having them in your phone, having them like having that book next to your nightstand. But what if you're at a place where you just don't even want to do the tool? How do you get to, all right, I have these tools, I'm going to use them, if you're at that dark of a spot?
Yeah, I think that's where the contextualization of the research comes in. It's like knowing that these are proven. I'm not just some girl from Newcastle that's saying, oh, these worked for me. Yes, they work for me, but they're also proven over long periods of time in various different examples of research. And it's knowing that you just have to do something. It's like finding that fight inside of you, that like deep, like grittiness and resilience, and saying, you know what, I'm going to do something. And it might not be much, but I'm going to do something. And it's in that decision to keep going that you'll realize that actually you're always going to get through one more day, because the only way you're not is if you're going to quit, and we're not going to quit. So the book is really it's a book about hope rather than being a book about suicide. It shows us that there is something that's worth living for, and life is worth fighting for. And I think one of the biggest premises is that we do it together. It's not something that you have to be on your own and isolated and thinking about what can I do in this moment. It's pick up the phone, pick up a tool, remind someone else that there's something that they can do. And the book is not a solution. It's a complex problem that we've got in the world, but it is a start. And it's having that essence of, I'm just going to start.
You talk a lot about connection in this book. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on the show and just even talk about this, because just this conversation alone is just going to open up hopefully other conversations with other people, or help people feel a little bit less alone in this, or maybe incentivize somebody to open up and tell somebody what they're struggling with. Now, how would you suggest someone maybe that's isolating a lot because they're in their own depression or they're in their own mental health journey and they're afraid to tell other people, and it looks really great on the outside, right? You talk about stories in the book of where it looks perfect on the outside, you don't know how they're struggling on the inside, and they're scared to tell other people. How would you suggest that people start to open up and form those connections and let people in so that they're not alone in their journey?
Yeah, I think it's finding the one person that you can speak with. I know in times when I've been touched by suicidal ideation and those dark thoughts of, well, what if I just wasn't here? It's felt challenging to go and speak to everyone about it. So we're not saying here that you have to go in a Facebook group and announce it to everyone, but find that person that is your person, that you know really is a stand for you, that's there for you, that is the person that keeps showing up. It could be a family member, a friend, it could be a therapist, it could be a peer, it could be a colleague, it could be a coach. But I know that I knew who my core people were. And I assembled this thing. I called it my United Council of Support. So I was kind of looking in my life and I said, who are my people that are the ride or dies? And like, I've got these 3 friends over here, and I've got this personal trainer over here. Because think about who do you actually have intimate conversations with? It's often your personal trainer or the girl that does your nails. So I just made a list. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to strengthen these relationships. I'm going to invest in them. Instead of having my very limited energy at the time be diluted across everyone, I'm going to look at who I can trust, who I can rely on, and make sure that they can rely on me too.
You're listening to The Jen Gottlieb Show.
Such a good segue in becoming aware of when you're the person someone's relying on. Or how do you, so for the person that's listening right now that maybe has someone in their life that they think is struggling, and maybe that person hasn't told them, but they sense it, how do they reach out? How do they hold space for them? Or if someone's listening and they have someone in their life that's actively struggling with mental health and they know that they are, how can someone be the most supportive friend, family member, spouse, partner?
I love the question, how are you feeling right now on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, what you're going to see in the book is that everything seems so simple that it sometimes seems like it's too much common sense. But again, if someone's suffering, you've got to be so clear in your communication, because how many times have you been asked the question or you've answered, how are you today? I'm fine. I'm good. It's like, what does that even mean anymore?
Yeah.
So for someone that's suffering, there's so much shame. Like, I know I felt shame. I felt embarrassed because I was finding days hard, and I didn't want to let anyone know because I was scared of how they would judge me. And really what I was doing in that time was I was judging myself. I was making myself wrong. I was punishing myself. I was making it even harder than it needed to be. And as soon as I started to open up and I started to share, you know what? I actually haven't been feeling good. It was just amazing because people shared that they hadn't been feeling good.
Yes.
Yeah. And you realize everyone goes through hard stuff and there's nothing wrong with it. it actually brings us closer together.
I agree. It's so crazy because and this was not like totally off topic of what we're talking about, but I will never forget this one time that I really realized that I was scrolling on social media and it looked like all my friends were having like the best time ever, best life. And I was struggling and I was feeling really sad or comparing myself or just feeling not good enough, having a hard time. And I would typically always reach out to this one friend and I was like, oh, she's just doing so great. I'm not going to bog her down with my shit. And we start chatting. I think she reached out to me or something. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to tell her I'm not really doing that well. I'm having a hard time. And immediately she's like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you shared that with me because now I feel more comfortable that I can share with you. It looks like I'm doing really well, but I'm actually really, really suffering. And that opened up this massive phone call where we deeply connected, shared with each other how we were feeling. And it was pretty much the same. We were both on social media looking at everybody else thinking that they had the best lives and we were suffering and we were like, what is wrong? And then we laughed and we connected and we were able to stay in touch about that. And that helped me move through that day. And at the end of the day, feeling less alone, more empowered. And that's not on the scale of, wanting to kill myself, but it is definitely something that I think would just be a great example of what happens when you connect with somebody else and you're able to both share vulnerably how each of you are feeling.
Yeah, and it's a distinction in the book as well, because the book is not a crisis intervention book. If someone's suffering, then they need to call 988 or text. There's a whole list of resources in there for crisis, or if you just want someone to talk with. The book is for everyone who has had a hard day, that wants to build their toolkit of resources. So when those hard days hit again, which they inevitably will, I don't know whether we're just getting old or whether this is what life is always like, but it seems like hard times have been more frequent and there's more change to navigate in the world. So you have a toolkit of things that you can use. You also have a stronger sense of self, an inner sense of resilience. You're able to laugh more easily because of the work that you've done on yourself. Mm-hmm. So it means that you can navigate these tough times if and when they do come. The book also isn't about us being on a crusade to make ourselves responsible for saving everyone else. This is about us doing the work on and for ourselves first. And knowing that when we look after ourselves and then we start to look after each other in community and conversations, the world will become a very different place.
I drink a lot of water and staying hydrated is unbelievably important to me each day. If you were in my office with me right now, you would see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 water bottles here just so that I stay completely hydrated while I'm working throughout the day. And here's the thing, I'm always looking for ways to make drinking water easier. I don't want to have to worry about where I'm going to get my clean water because having safe, clean water is the last thing you want to worry about when you're trying to work throughout the day and not think about it and just stay hydrated. And that is why I absolutely love AquaTrue. It's a water purifier. It's amazing. AquaTrue uses a 4-stage reverse osmosis purification process, and their countertop purifiers work with no installation or plumbing. They sent it to me. It was so unbelievably easy to set it up and have clean, delicious water in seconds. They have water purifiers to fit every type of home too, from installation-free countertop purifiers to higher capacity under sink options. They even have a Wi-Fi connected purifier and a mineral boost option too. I am absolutely obsessed with my AquaTrue, and it fills up all of my water bottles to keep me hydrated throughout the day with clean, delicious water. So you got to get in on this. You got to get your AquaTrue. You got to jump in and try it and let me know what you think. You can try a 30-day money-back guarantee. And by the way, this makes an absolutely amazing gift. Today, my listeners receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com. That's AQUATRU.com and enter the code GENG at checkout. GENG at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use promo code GENG. GENG. Do you think that social media has increased this number of suicide?
For sure. I mean, there's actual stats that show that since the invention of Instagram, the suicide rates have absolutely soared, and especially in young girls. My friend that took her own life, she was actually a reality TV star on the series Love Island. And she used to say to me, she said, Nick, it's really hard because after skyrocketing to fame, I don't know who my real friends are. And you've always been there with me and for me. And I know who my real friends are, but I also thought that everyone else was my real friend as well. And they just wanted something from me. Or we look at the trolls online. She actually did a video where she shared, she was a stand against bullying online. And she said, this is why people take their own lives. And she's in a video clip and I watch it back. And then that happened for her as well. So it's very poignant. And you see in young girls, it's one of the leading causes of death. It's actually the second leading cause of death in America and fourth worldwide. So when you think about how vulnerable the next generation are, it's scary, but it's also, whether you buy the book for yourself or you read it because one day in the future you want to become a dad or you want to become a mum, I think we have a responsibility to start to do this work for these generations to come.
I agree. How do we talk to our girls? What do we say to them? Someone that's listening that has a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old girl that's experiencing getting on social media, getting on Instagram, seeing all of this stuff. Now the bullying, and I know you talk about your bullying experience when you were 11 in the beginning of the book, the bullying doesn't end now. It comes home with us too, in our phone. What would you suggest? How do we start to navigate, if there is any way to even navigate other than taking their phone away, but that can't be a permanent solution?
Yeah, so from the research, we know that negative emotions and negative experiences are stronger than positive. So for every negative thing that happens, you remember it more easily. It feels harder in your body. And you need 3 to 5 or even 11 positives, to tip that balance.
Oh my gosh.
So that's something that's important for us to recognize and realize, because let's say your daughter comes home and she's experienced bullying or negativity. That might have happened 3 times or 5 times in the last week. The positive reinforcement has to be there in order for her to feel like she has the confidence to build herself back up and feel like she gets to borrow that belief from you in the process. And then practically, it's really about taking these tools and developing almost rituals within the home. So I used to sit down at the dinner table with my parents, and we would never talk about gratitude or anything like that at that time, but we would talk. And I don't know how much that texture of conversation or ritual around family is still present or not present in the modern day home. But there's things that we can do, and we could have us all sit around a table and say, okay, what 3 things are we grateful for right now? What is it that you've overcome? What did you learn through that? How did you grow? And it doesn't have to be a conversation about suicide, but a conversation that is promoting positive mental health, so that you would know and your daughter or your son or family member would feel comfortable and confident that you were that safe space for them should they have a day where they really need to reach out.
That's so good. I want everybody to really listen. It's not about pushing it down their throat and talking about it all. It's creating the space that's safe so that they can come to them. What would you say are maybe some of the signs to look out for if you are a loved one that's concerned about somebody else?
Yeah, withdrawal is the first one. So it's isolation. If you actually look at the flip side of that, the thing that works the most, the element that is correlated as strongly with saving lives or preventing suicide is having a sense of belonging. So it is social connectedness. And when you see someone retreating or they're not showing up in relationship, they're not talking, communicating, or going to the social engagements, that might be an initial red flag. You can also look at somebody saying that they're not enjoying their normal things that they would usually enjoy in the same way. So usually they enjoy going to the gym or they enjoy doing some sort of hobby. That kind of excitement has worn off and you see their vitality is leaving them. They're the warning signs. But I also feel like we have to do this right now. Warning sign or no warning sign. It's prevention rather than cure. And it's like, how can we live more hope-filled, joy-filled lives where we're experiencing the richness? Like, I see a vision for a world where suicide no longer exists. I remember when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, we used to go on vacation on planes and you could smoke on the planes, which is just outrageous, right? You just wouldn't see that now. I want us to be having a conversation in the future where we look back and say, oh, remember when suicide was a thing? How outrageous is that? I want it to be like the equivalent of smoking on planes, a world where suicide no longer exists.
How do we make that happen?
Step by step, gently, and by walking the path together. So it's not one thing, and I'm not a purist. I'm not positive psychology is the only solution. This is one modality that is a great modality because it lifts us all up. So while you're going to do your trauma work with your therapist, or while you're doing your somatics or whatever it is, while you're working on your relationship, do this as well, because it's going to balance things out. It's going to help you feel more vital, have a lightness. This book was mostly written walking. So I put my headphones in, I walked, I did voice notes, I did calls with my publisher. And I think the energy of me being in a space of lightness and being around trees added something to it, so that it feels like it's not a book about doom and gloom. It is this book about what's possible together.
It absolutely is. It feels like a hug. I said that already. And that's like the first word that keeps coming to me when I was reading that book. I felt like I was held by that book. And when you say doing the work in the book, I want you to give everybody some more examples. I know we talked about some of the tiny tools, but what are some more modalities that we can all start to do? Very simple things, step by step, even just to, get us through this day by doing one thing to make us feel a little bit more hopeful or a little bit more joyful or even more connected.
Yes, I love that. So breath. Coming back to your breath, I love that the tools are simple, they're easy to use. And there's a breath pattern in the book that I teach, which is a 4-7-8 breath pattern. So what we find is that your nervous system actually relaxes when you have a longer out breath compared with an in breath.
Ooh.
So if you're feeling any anxiety in your body, then you can just breathe in for 4, hold the breath for 7, and breathe out for 8. And that pattern will start to relax you. You'll start to feel more calm. And I always say, pick up a tiny tool and then tackle the thing that you were going to do.
Ooh. I love this tactical stuff because I know that there's someone listening to this right now that's anxious. The reason I know that is because I listen to podcasts all day long and I'm often very anxious and can't calm down my nervous system. And if you're listening to this right now and you're feeling any sense of anxiety, Niyc just gave you a great actionable tool that you can do right now. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it will help you recenter yourself in this moment so that maybe you can act differently in the next minute.
Yeah.
In the next half hour.
And it's also that connection between the mind and the body. People think that psychology is just about thinking. And actually, when you're in a state of suffering or you're having a hard day, it's almost like you don't want to think anymore because you're so in your head. So a lot of the tools in the book, they're actually somatic focused. And that's been my experience as a positive psychologist. I've always focused on the body.
What does somatic mean?
So it means associated with your physiology and your body. So you know that when you move your body, you move your mood. Mm-hmm. So just creating that physical shift can then create a psychological and emotional shift as well.
Girlfriend, you're speaking my language. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the importance of movement, going out for a walk, moving your body in any way, shape, or form when it comes to feeling happy.
Yeah.
or joy? I don't know. What would you define it as? Like,
I feel like it's a vitality and it's just associated with so many good things. It opens up your mind ready for the intake of information. It helps you build relationships more easily. I think of these things like gateways. So it's almost like, what is the first thing that you can do in order to then implement another tool? So there's a tool in here called the Hope Map, which is a 6-step question-based tool, which helps you to reach a goal. So if you know that you've got something that you want to accomplish, you can outline the goal. You can identify different ways that you can get there. So rather than getting stuck on one thing or another, think of 10 different fun, creative ways. Then identify any obstacles. Ask yourself, what are the pathways through the obstacles? Because sometimes we don't think about things going wrong. And then when they do, we get stuck. Then ask yourself, why do you want the goal and who can support you? So those 6 steps in that order are proven to help you create an outcome. But for you to do something like that and do 6 steps when you're not feeling great, it's not really realistic. So could you use a gateway tool to shift the way that you feel? I love shamanic shaking. So every day I literally shake out my whole entire body and it feels so good.
I saw that in the book. I was like, I don't know what this means. What is this shaking thing? Explain.
I love it. You're going to be
okay. Tell me.
On it. So I have an infrared mat, but you don't have to do an infrared mat. You can do it anywhere. You can literally do it in the bathroom at the airport.
Okay, great.
And the idea is that we're going through our lives and things can be jarring, or they can give us a reaction in our body. So something bad happens and it can put us into fight or flight. We want to clear that energy and move the emotion through our body. So every single day, I will literally just start to bounce on the spot and I'll start to shake out my hands, all of my shoulders, all my legs, all down my body. I'll close my eyes and I'll actually attach it to some sort of sound as well. So I'll do my deep breathing and then I'll release the sound. I'll think about if there's anything that has felt like tension or something I'm tolerating within my life or my day. And I'll just allow that to move through my body. And it feels so good. I usually put on a crazy jungle soundtrack.
Okay.
Yeah, it's odd. I'm going to FaceTime you next time.
I'm done. I'm going to try it. I know. Well, for me personally, it's impossible for me to still feel anxious or terrible after I've either gone for a walk or did a workout or danced. Is there a connection to music and dancing? There has to be, because it's like, it's almost like an animalistic thing. If I'm walking and I'm like, I'm in a bad mood, I don't want to put on a happy song because I know I'm going to be happy. I don't want to be happy right now. I just want to be mad. But like it'll just come on, maybe like a Broadway show tune or something I listened to as a kid, or a Disney song or something that just really like lights up my soul, or even maybe a Beyonce song that I would dance to. It comes on and I can't not be happy. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And then I skip down the street. I mean, I may get anxious when I come home and it wears off, but either way, in that moment, it shifts me. Mm-hmm. Why does that happen?
So we have a emotional frequency scale within our bodies. So every single emotion is attached to, almost like tuning into a radio. Mm-hmm. So like love, 432, above 500, those like really high energy, positive emotions, they're known as broadening and building. So they open up your mind. They help you to feel lighter and brighter. And moving into those states, music has a certain frequency. So it's almost like you're attuning your body to a higher vibration and a higher frequency.
Makes so much sense.
So much sense. And music's a gateway for me too. It's one of those things I get in the car, or I'll put it on in the morning, and then something activates in me. I get a little bit more energy, a little bit more life force, and then I can go and do the next thing.
Yes.
I can go and do the meditation, or I can practice the breath work or the journaling, or pick out a tool, or I love sending people gratitude texts in the morning. Mm-hmm. And that makes me break down into tears, because you realize how much we already have. We're just not putting our attention on it. So when you're suffering and you're in a downward spiral, it's like everything is going wrong. I'm doing a really bad job. As soon as you send a gratitude text to someone, you're reminded of how much you have and how supported you are and how much you love that person. And I guarantee you'll get an amazing response back as well. It's really beautiful in both directions. And they've shown that gratitude is stronger when it's shared.
Cool.
So it's great to do on your own as a personal practice, but you share it with someone, it strengthens your relationship, but it also boosts your well-being too.
So true. I was talking about that this morning, the gratitude text messages. It's so nice. And getting them as well, receiving them from people is, I don't know, I feel like my friends kind of know intuitively, or the universe knows intuitively when I'm going through a hard time, because either I notice them a lot more and I appreciate them a lot more when I'm going through a hard time, or I just get more. But when I get a gratitude text when I'm not having a great day, it can change everything. So those of you like that are listening right now, if you feel, and this is what I've just been trying to practice, I love that you brought this up, Nick, it's so important. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I should really tell that person how I feel about them. No, I'm not going to. They don't need to hear about that right now. They're busy, or like they don't. No, they probably do. And it'll probably make their entire day.
Yeah, for sure. And then what I want you to do, if you don't do this already, screenshot the gratitude text, make a folder on your phone, give it a label that means something to you, and save it in there.
Ooh.
So mine's called the GPI. It's called the Good Person Inventory. It's like reminding yourself that you're a good person, even when things feel hard. So in there, I've got all of these messages. For me, it's not work related. It has to be personal life. And I go in there and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm reminded, I'm uplifted. And then you can have a better day.
I love that. Wait, I have the worst album in my phone. So I only have one album in my phone of communication like that. And it's my rejection emails. So whenever I'm rejected,
that is not a positive psychology intervention, Jen.
It's how I make friends with rejection. I go in there and I'm, no, this is way better.
I love
way better. I love it.
Get outside of your comfort zone and into your best life, one small step at a time.
And you know what I'm really loving about this? That these are gateways. I love this concept, and I've never heard about it before. And I really just want to double down on this, how brilliant and genius this is, because it's a really big ask to ask someone to go and sit down and meditate, or go do therapy, or go have a really intense conversation, or go even do a huge workout. But if you use one of these little gateway tools, it can make it easier to do that big thing. So these aren't big, these are tiny tools. I love it.
Cute,
so
right?
in the book, there's a whole list, you guys, of all of these tiny tools that can be little gateways that could help you do the big thing that could help you the most. I want to go back to, in the book you share this, so I hope you're okay sharing this on the podcast, because I think this will be very helpful to people. You also had a moment in your life where you attempted to take your own life when you were 11. Would you mind taking us back to that experience?
Yeah. And I mean, looking back, it doesn't even seem like it was me now, because I've grown and I now feel stronger than ever before. But little Nicola back then wasn't as confident as I am now. And I used to get bullied the worst in PE. So to be sat here, to be sharing a love for movement with you and a love for personal training and the gym is a huge thing, because that was the most terror-filled time for me. Because in the classroom, it was structured and I was very academic, so I could just get on with my work and it would be fine. As soon as we went into the sports hall and the teacher wasn't looking, everything was a little bit more fluid, that's when the bullying would get really bad. And the school that I went to at that time was a school where girls would physically fight. And I can still remember the circle of people that was around us. And I can remember what people were saying. And it's like, I can go back to that moment because it's such a visceral thing within me. Even though it doesn't emotionally trigger me anymore, I knew that a Tuesday was coming. And it was Tuesday when I had PE. And my parents had listened to me and we'd been in to see the school a few times. But they didn't have the tools. They didn't know what to do. So I was just kind of getting on with things. And that day, I could not face going to school. So I took all of the pills in my mum's medicine cabinet. And I ended up telling her what I'd done. And she called my dad and said, Phil, you have to come home from work. Like, we're going to the hospital. I'll meet you there. And I was in hospital for 2 days, and then I was homeschooled for 6 months. And luckily I was fine, but I felt so ashamed of what I'd done, and so embarrassed of what I put my parents through, that I knew that I would never, ever, ever do that to myself, to my body, to them ever again. So it's interesting because the biggest predictor of a successful suicide is a previous suicide attempt. And that's why these tools are so important, because if we can prevent the attempts, then we can prevent people from getting into that decline where suicide is a possibility. I now know, even though I've had those thoughts maybe another 3 or 4 times, and it's been times where I've been really, really sick, or times where I've really struggled sleeping, and it's been like this desperation feeling. But even though I've had the desperation feeling, I've also had this knowing and this commitment and this resolve that I will never, ever do that. Never, ever do that. And I know that I've got tools and I've got support. And I know, because I've already used them, that this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And the hard stuff is temporary. And that's where the title of the book comes from, One More Day. It's like, just give me one more day. Just keep going one more day. Like, we're in this together. And then it's one more day, and one more day after that. And then all of a sudden, that dark cloud that was hanging over you, it's not as gray anymore. Or it's moved a little bit further away. Mm-hmm. And you can start to see and start to feel the lightness.
What would you say to that little girl now?
I mean, I would say keep going, it's going to be okay. But I would also be having these conversations with her every day. It would be speaking about what bullying is, why people bully each other, about how to feel stronger, about how to be compassionate towards people who are suffering.
Thank you for sharing all that.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. I think that these conversations, they're hard to have. They might be hard to listen to too. I think they're important to have. My goal, having you on this podcast, talking about this book, hoping that every single person that listens gets this book, is so that we can have the conversation so if someone's struggling, they feel less alone. They know that this is a thing they can talk about. They can be open about it. They know the numbers they can call, the numbers they can text, tools they can use, that they can reach out to people, that there are books like this that they can go grab if they don't even have anybody that they think that they can reach out to. Something came up for me as well, though, when we're having this conversation that I just want to ask you about, that I know there's probably people out there thinking this and maybe asking in their mind. And what about actual mental illness? So someone that has been diagnosed with mental illness, what would you suggest? I mean, like, what's the difference between using a tiny tool like going out and walking and all of that, or, going and getting professional help?
Yeah. So it doesn't replace professional help. So if you are suffering, you're in crisis, or you've been diagnosed with a mental illness, then you have to consult your doctor and you have to get support from there first. This is something that you can use alongside, that you can do as well. So it's something that can be supportive to the prescription that you've already been offered. A lot of these tools do work, and they are proven to work for clinical populations, but we're not saying that this is the thing that's going to cure everything. This is prevention rather than crisis intervention. So I think that's a really important distinction to make. I also, what I have been really beautifully surprised by is how willing people are to have these conversations now. So I went to the Formula One in Vegas last year with 12 friends, all of who were men, okay? And I finished writing the first draft of the book and I went to send it off. And they were like, come on, Nick, come on. Like, we're going to go to the qualifying. And I remember getting into the taxis and they said, congratulations on the book. What's it about? And I still had this apprehension where I thought, am I going to be that weirdo that's like writing something that's so taboo? And I said, it's about suicide prevention. Honestly, pretty much every single man in that group opened up to me at one point over the next few days and said, Nick, I felt like that too. Or my sister struggled like that. So it's like what's personal is universal. And just because you think that you're the only one who's suffering, remember that that's not the case. I've just loved that so many men are opening up about this. There's a statistic that shows as well that entrepreneurs, 72% of entrepreneurs are either directly or indirectly affected by mental health challenges. I think it's 77% of those do not seek support. 81% hide it completely. So when we're having this conversation, you felt like that and hid it. I felt like this and hid it. How many other people out there are going to feel more comfortable now talking about it because we've had this conversation today?
I have full body chills everywhere. I know that this is an important conversation. Nick, can you, if someone's really leaning in right now and they're like, yes, me too, what do I even do? Like, just if you could give people a step-by-step process, if someone's listening and either they know someone that is truly suffering or they themselves are truly suffering, let's give them action steps.
Yeah. I think the first thing is have the conversation. Don't be scared to talk. It's proven that talking helps. So it's, how are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10? Start to talk about the emotion. There's a list of emotions in there because, again, when you're suffering, it's hard to name it. So you just want to get used to and get comfortable with having conversations where you're talking about it in the first place. And then looking at what can you then do? Okay, so we're going to make a plan together. Or let's decide how can we make this a mental health adventure rather than something that feels hard all of the time. I think the important thing is really releasing the shame within ourselves and within the conversation, because the shame is a blocker. So it's almost like making it okay and letting someone know that they're not judged, and you opening up and not judging yourself is the first step. Then I would reach for a gateway tool. So there's not a one size fits all approach. So it's not everybody do this one thing. It's more explore the menu of tools and see what feels good for you. See if it's maybe like rocking your body. So rocking is very soothing. Or maybe it's the breath patterns. Maybe it's having a warm bath. Maybe it's having a slow morning instead of being go, go, go all of the time. Now, these things sound so simple, but then what it's going to do is it's going to give you a little bit of relief. So relief is a word that really, I feel, lands with this particular work. It's the relief. It's the hope. It's understanding that there is going to be a better day. It's finding that sense of resilience. But it's also making your own plan, choosing your own adventure, calling your power back and understanding you can do this. And saying these are the things that I've practiced and that really work for me. I don't like the movement thing that Nick and Jen were talking about, but I do like these things over here. Yeah. And that's okay.
That's okay. To each his own. Pick one. Just do one.
Do it.
Or of course, call, text, hotlines. There's numbers in the book. And you know what?
Numbers are in the book.
I'm going to put numbers in the show notes as well, and in the YouTube comments, or a little section underneath the YouTube for you guys of where you can call, text to get help. But this book, I highly recommend. I want everybody to have this book. Everybody. I just want more light on this topic. I think it's unbelievably important. I'm so ridiculously grateful for you for being courageous enough to write a book talking about this topic. That is a courageous topic to take on. And it's so insanely important. And I personally thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming out here to Florida from California to chat with me about it so that we can share this. I'm hoping that if you're listening to this, you share it with somebody that you love. And of course, get this book. Obviously, like they can pre-order it when they're listening to this. It's available for pre-order. And then I think a week later, it'll come out.
Yeah. So you can get it at onemoredaybook.com. And it's in all of the retailers. So Barnes & Noble, Waterstones in the UK, Target, which just feels like such a yes for mental health being a mainstream conversation.
Such a yes. Thank you, Nick. Is there anything else that you want to tell our listeners? Please.
Just that it's possible. Like, it's possible to live a lighter life. It's possible, and life is worth living. I think that's the main thing, like the things that you can do, and you don't always know when you're planting the seeds where it's going to grow, but you do trust that that plant is going to grow, the flower is going to blossom when you put the intention in and you take the steps, the small positive steps today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This is so important. Love you.
Love you.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Jen Gottlieb Show. I will see you next time. Share, like, subscribe, all the things. And please connect with Niyc Pidgeon on all the socials, everywhere. Grab the book, do all the things. Thanks for being here. See you next time.